Shalom. First and foremost, want to give honor and praise unto Yah, the creator of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya ben Yisrael. Want to go over something to clarify some controversial issues within what some might call the conscious community, the awakened community, the understanding of history community among us as people of color. Wanted to first read the definition of the word Sumer, Sumer, and it says, an ancient region in southern Mesopotamia, which contained a number of independent cities and city-states, of which the first was established possibly as early as 5000 BC, conquered by the Elamites, and about 2000 BC by the Babylonians. A number of its cities as Ur, Uruk, Kish, and Lagash are major archaeological sites in southern Iraq. Now, the point of me reading that is to show the dating of when they stated that the Sumerian civilization can be dated as old to as 5000 BC. Now, Sumer in the Bible is referred to as Shinar. Many people state that the Egyptian civilization is older than that of the Sumerians. However, such is not the case. And I have a book here about Egypt itself that confirms such. It is called The Civilization of Ancient Egypt by Paul Johnson. And on page 15 we read this. Again, in the creation of cities, Egypt was a late developer compared with Western Asia. The Sumerians, and what is now southern Iraq, had sizable cities by the middle of the 4th millennium BC, that is to say 3500 BC, at a time when the Egyptians were living in nothing larger than a village. So I wanted to point that out there because you have many brothers and sisters who state emphatically that the ancient Egyptian and the Nile Valley civilization is the oldest in the entire world. Let's read on. The Sumerians seem to have been several hundred years ahead of the Nile Valley in developing an essential urban pattern of trading and manufacturing with large city temples and a civic government. See, these are things, brothers and sisters, that a people need in order to survive inside of an economy. You need a government which has laws, rules, regulations, large city temples, another subject because they had their own temples in which they did whatever they did, a pattern of trading and manufacturing. It is actually the Sumerians that invented what we know and understand as glass of today. You see, inside of the Sumerian civilization, they had what you will call irrigation canals in which they went because the land of Sumer is between what we call the Tigris and the Euphrates. And they would dig into the ground of it so that way they can have irrigation. That's called building, brothers and sisters. In order to sit there and have an affluent city, you need water. This is why you notice most major cities, even in the United States, is by water. LA by water, San Francisco by water, Washington DC by water, Miami by water, New York City by water. Most major cities throughout the world is usually centered around or in the vicinity of large bodies of water. So what the ancient Sumerians did was when they saw that would be affluent for them, they would dig into the ground and sit there and build other cities upon other cities and have what we will call a canal going through from the Tigris and Euphrates River for irrigation purposes. Now, I wanted to speak, brothers and sisters, briefly about this date that they have here as 5000 BCE. Now, most people into the college world, into the dating and carbon dating and so forth and so on, some of the things in which they try to sit there and shows it to be actually and emphatically incorrect. Because according to their timeline, they state that people began to populate the earth from 100,000 BCE until 10,000 BCE. But then they'll tell you that farming and agriculture did not start until 10,000 BCE. Let me repeat that. They will tell you that people began to populate in the earth as early as 100,000 BCE. But irrigation, agriculture, farming, so forth and so on, did not start until 10,000 BCE. There's a problem with your timeline because then you got to explain what did the people eat over the 80,000 years from 100,000 BCE until 10,000 BCE. They had to eat in order to be populous because in order to make more people, you have to be intimate with the opposite sex. And in order to make people to be healthy, you have to eat off the earth. So therefore, the timeline and the actuality of certain things makes actually no sense once it comes down to when they try to sit there and state 10,000 BCE is the time in which farming and agriculture came about. And then they'll tell you people existed over 80,000 years before that. That emphatically makes no sense. Okay, now, one of the things to point out also, brothers and sisters, concerning this subject right here, let's go into the scriptures itself. Wanted to go into the book of Genesis, if we will. We are in the book of Genesis, chapter 11. We're going to start in verse 1. Right? Hopefully everybody's able to follow along and understand what's being presented. Genesis chapter 11, verse 1 says, "And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, which may reach heaven. And let us make a name for us, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." Now, one of the things I wanted to point out is the fact in verse 3, it distinctly says they had brick. Brick, brothers and sisters, is very important concerning this matter because it was actually in what you would call Mesopotamia that they actually had brick used for certain things. Whereas the ancient Egyptians, they had what you would call stone used for certain things. Now, this is not to sit there and say Sumeria was better or Egypt was better or Sumeria was worse or Egypt was worse, because each used what they had available in each society to build what they was going to build. And one of the things that the Egyptians had over the Sumerians now in actuality is the fact that since the Egyptians used stones to build things, you still see a lot of their relics and archaeology and everything today. Whereas the Sumerians in ancient Sumeria, they used bricks. So over the course of decade after decade, century after century, with the weather, the climate, and everything like that, bricks are not going to stand as long in duration as a stone would. So that shows you the intelligence that the Egyptians had in that aspect. So it's not to say that the Sumerians in that aspect was dumb, but apparently the Sumerians did not intend for this civilization to fall. So if anything, they will be thinking, we're going to have bricks, and when that wears out, we'll put more bricks, just like they do in society today. You see? So, brothers and sisters, if we can continue to move on upon this subject matter right here. Now, remember the fact that the scriptures distinctly says that they used bricks, because that becomes very, very, very important in part 2 of this presentation. All right? Now, I have a book here entitled Sumerians, Their History, Culture, and Character by Samuel Kramer. Now, this right here gets into the family ties between the people in the Bible and the people of the Sumerians in this subject here. Right? On page 298, we read the following. It says this: Nor is Shem the only example of a Hebrew word borrowed from a Sumerian word without its final consonant. The name of the city where Abraham was born is written as Ur or Ur in the Bible, but the Sumerian name has long been known is not Ur but Urim. In Ur in for example, the Urim-ah or Ur-ah, in this case too. Therefore, the biblical authors had borrowed the name as actually pronounced in Sumerian when not followed by the grammatical element beginning with a vowel. That just shows you the cross references in linguistics. If Phobos' hypothesis turns out to be correct, and Shem is identified and to be identical with Sumer, we must assume that the Hebrew authors of the Bible, or at least some of them, considered the Sumerians to have been the original ancestors of the Hebrew people. So I wanted to read that part right there because according to this author is saying that according to the Bible, some of the authors of the Bible considered to be the ancestors of the Hebrews. Now let's go and see if the Bible actually speaks about such a matter. If we go, brothers and sisters, into the book of Ezekiel, the 23rd chapter, what we're speaking about in this aspect here, brothers and sisters, is Aholah and Aholibah. Aholah being Israel and Aholibah being Judah. And Ezekiel in this part is going over their history. And in Ezekiel 23, verse 15, here is what we read. Girded with girdles upon their loins, exceeding in dyed attire upon their heads, all of them princes to look to, after the manner of the Babylonians of Chaldea, the land of their nativity. Now I wanted to let it be known and understood the part that was being spoken about. It distinctly tells you, brothers and sisters, that the children of Israel is speaking in reference about the land of Babylonia as being where they were originally from. All right. Abraham came from Ur of the Chaldees. All right. So let that be known and understood. In the land where Abraham came from, being Ur of Chaldea, brothers and sisters, that same land was referred to later on in today's time as the land of Basra, which is in southern Iraq. The original people of Iraq were people of color. Unfortunately, what happens in a lot of times is that a lot of people go and try to talk about ancient Egypt and modern Sumer. I want you to understand what's being said. A lot of times they go into what is referred to as ancient Egypt and modern Sumer. So they'll sit there and look at Iraq today and say, see, look, it's all bombed up. Oh, there's nothing there. Archaeology can't be precise. Then they'll go into ancient Egypt, which was not bombed up by anybody in that manner. And they'll say, see, look at all of the ancients, relics and so forth. Egypt had to be older. See, those are some of the games played by some people. Now, this book here, part of the title is The First Cities of Mesopotamia. This is dated, according to this, 4300 to 2334 BCE. And wanted to go over this part here. It distinctly says the land of Ur and Eridu and Uruk. Okay, now this land, this water right here is the Persian Gulf. Mesopotamia now is actually the Greek word which means the land between the rivers, being the Tigris and the Euphrates. All right, so let that be known and understood what's being presented in this part right here. Shalom for part 1.